Hello, everyone. My name is Jillian Lee Meyer. I am a dual PhD student in social psychology and cognitive science, studying moral psychology at Indiana University, Bloomington. I like to make these presentations and videos to kind of get my thoughts out there about the research that I'm doing and the kind of things that I'm thinking about, but also to kind of crowdsource because a lot of this stuff is very applicable to what we see in our daily lives. I've noticed that a lot of research recently has started to look at artificial intelligence, things like large language models like ChatGPT or Google Gemini, things like that. And so this is a presentation that I've had for a couple years now about the ethics of using AI and specifically psychology research. I'm focusing on like the different parts of a psychology paper, a little methodology too. So this could be something that applies to a similar social science course or even a philosophy course, something like that. But the point of this presentation is a lot less me talking and more of discussion based. So if you like, you can just watch this straight through and just hear me monologue about what my thoughts are. But I really encourage reflection on the things that you think. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions about, do you think this is an ethical or an unethical way to, look something up or to use ChatGPT or something like that. And I really want you to think about it. What I think, I might not even necessarily be saying what I think. I might be playing devil's advocate. You never know. So yeah, I encourage reflection, group work too, talking in groups. You'll have time. I'll tell you when you can pause and talk to your groups if you like. But with that, I don't want to waste too much time. So we're going to be talking, like I said, about what is ethical and what is not when it comes to using AI and LLMs in our psychology research. The first thing I wanted to ask is, what have your experiences been with ChatGPT so far in academia? So at any of your classes, high school, college, whatever it is, just kind of reflect on what you've used it on so far to give yourself a baseline of, okay, here's what I've already established in my head as a good use of it. Here's what I've already established in my head as a bad use of it. So questions up here like, have you ever used ChatGPT in the classroom for a homework assignment or something like that? Have your professors use ChatGPT for anything? Maybe, it focuses on ChatGPT, but you might even talk about some other kind of AI that grades discussion posts or something. I don't know. Has ChatGPT or other AI been helpful? Has it been harmful? Do you feel like you're cheating when you use ChatGPT? Why or why not? That is very contested, especially what constitutes cheating using ChatGPT versus if you're using Google or something like that. So those are kind of the emotional responses that people have. Oh my gosh, I think it's cheating. I think it's unfair. So kind of think about yourself. Think if you have any of those feelings, what those feelings might be about. Stop yapping. You can pause the video here. If not, welcome back. We'll keep going. And we're going to talk about ways to use ChatGPT in research. You see that here I focus exclusively on ChatGPT. Anytime I say ChatGPT, I mean any kind of AI or LLM that you can use that does this kind of stuff. Perplexity is one that is often used in research now. And again, I'm going to go through kind of each section of a psychology paper from the intro through the conclusion, just to kind of divide up what section of research, what area I'm talking about. But like I said, not necessarily targeted at ChatGPT. That's just one that's very popular and lots of people know about. So we're going to start with the literature review. Oh my gosh, probably my least favorite part of the paper when it comes to writing it, mostly because you pick up these things when you're doing psychology theory. It's like, okay, confirmation bias is a thing. I know that. But then it's like, oh, now I got to find a source to cite it. And when you start specializing, like me in moral psychology, it's like, how many times can I, reframe moral foundations theory so I'm not self-plagiarizing? Concerns like that. So what do you think about using AI or LLMs when writing your literature review? So one example of this might be searching for research. So I might be writing a paper about moral psychology, specifically measurement and assessment when it comes to morality. And so I might say to ChatGPT, what are some of the most well-known or biggest examples of measures of morality out there? Then it gives me Kohlberg stages of moral development. I could take that to Google Scholar, look it up, find the citation, the defining issues test that goes with that, moral judgment interview, moral foundations. So getting ideas is like a starting place of, I know what I'm trying to say, what I want to talk about, but I need specific examples. And then the other one on the other side is drafting a paragraph. And so I wrote a paper that's published in Frontiers about mental health of college students during the COVID-19 pandemic. So what do you think about just outright writing it for you? If I say, okay, I know that I want to write a paragraph about how COVID-19 has negatively impacted mental health. That's something that seems very obvious to me, but I'm going to have to spell it all out. I'm going to have to find sources. Maybe I've written this kind of paragraph before for another mental health and COVID paper that I'm writing. What do you think about saying draft this paragraph? And even if you, let's say you go back too, and you go back to the paragraph and say, I don't like this, swap it out. I like this more. Can you use this word here? Stuff like that, kind of workshopping with it. So those are two examples. There are other examples you could think of using it in the lit review, but feel free for some reflection or discussion now. I'm trying to be very neutral in the way that I'm talking. Good. All right. And we're back. Again, no right or wrong answers. Next, I want to move into methodology. So how you start planning, how you want to test what you want to test. This is an example of a time I was using a theory called minimal groups paradigm. If you're not familiar with that, basically it's an in-group, out-group bias theory that says that you really don't even need established groups like race or political ideology. You could just say, you know, you're flipping a coin and you're on team heads, you're on team tails, and you'll see some kind of in-group, out-group bias when it comes to that. So minimal groups, the most minimal condition you could have in order to encourage an in-group, out-group bias. So we were doing a research project using minimal groups paradigm, and I just thought, what are some examples of things we could do? Flipping a coin, what's your favorite animal list? What birthday do you have? If you're born in the first half of the year, the second half of the year, you're now team A, team B. Again, just like very minimal groupings here. And so I could go to ChatGPT or an LLM and say, what are some examples of ways that people have used this paradigm in the past? What did they do with it? And then ChatGPT says, these are different things I see online that have been used in different pieces of research testing minimal groups paradigm. Then I could take this, go to Google Scholar and say, research study, minimal groups, animal preference, or flipping a coin. And it might make it easier to find it. Is this any different from just going to Google Scholar straight out and saying minimal groups, flipping a coin? You can talk about that. And then another idea that I had about using these in research is coming up a little more specifically with ideas for an experiment. So let's say that I want to assess college students on 10 moral dilemmas and see how they react. Then going to ChatGPT and saying, what are some examples of moral dilemmas that really target or appeal to 18 to 22-year-old college students? Then gives me a list of those, and those are my starting point to the dilemmas I want to use, or alternatively, just copying and pasting straight out from ChatGPT. Alternatively, copying and pasting straight from ChatGPT and citing ChatGPT versus not citing it. Is it as ethical as making your own? If you cite ChatGPT's dilemmas, go for it. Awesome. Okay. So next up, results. Some of you, if you have taken a lab or methodology psychology course in undergrad, you might have used SPSS to analyze data. You might have used JASP. Those are known as point and click ways to analyze data, where you're just clicking descriptive statistic. This is the test I want to run, putting in your variables and running it. You can also use computer programs such as R, VS Code, Python, MATLAB, different programs where you write code in order to analyze your data. Now, what's great about this is that when you have this code, if you then did something like a similar study, a part 2 or a direct replication of that study, you have all of the tests in the code already, so you don't have to run everything again by clicking all the same tests all over again. You can just have this code copied and then pasted and put in your new data set, and it'll run it. So it could save time if you're doing something like that. So again, this is one way that we could get results. When it comes to code, you could say, what is the code, like straight up write what the code is to run an independent samples t-test between scores on moral intuition and moral reasoning. So telling it to run a t-test, telling it what my variables are, and to the right, you see it outputs what I need. And I can just copy that code and paste it into R or whatever I'm using and run it. Or you can use graphs. You can put in code to make a graph. So our code for creating a scatter plot. And in this sense, you can run these tests with computer programming without really having to learn it. I mean, I'm not suggesting that. I've learned the basics of a lot of it. But I will be unbiased and not tell you if I've used ChatGPT to run it, that you can probably guess. But anyway, so, is that a good or bad thing? Like, why do we have our stats classes if we can use resources like this? Is it better to just know how to do it naturally instead of always relying on AI or LLMs, And think about the fact too that every day here, the LLMs are at their minimum of what they're going to be able to do. So that makes sense. Every day they're getting better. And so, yeah, there's a lot of arguments for, oh, it'll mess up your code, you have to pay attention. And that is absolutely true. I look over all the codes that it writes for me. And I go back and forth with it a lot. I've learned certain things like, oh, here's how you can change the font. Here's how you can change the color. So you do definitely have to look out for it. But if it's 10 times better tomorrow, if it's 100 times better in 100 years, are we going to be recommending to use it for psychology statistics? All right, I'm going to be quiet. Pros and cons of this. Is it ethical? Is it unethical? Okay, the next part of results is you have your output. You put in the code or you point and click, run a t-test, and you have your output. This is what it shows you here. And you might look at it and be like, I remember a lot of this from stats, but honestly, I'm kind of getting lost in it. I can't find exactly the values I need to report on. So I could go to an LLM and say, what does this multiple R squared mean? What does the F statistic mean? Also, I can copy and paste that, put it into an LLM and say, what are the important numbers for me to know? Even going further than that, saying, could you write the APA citation with the values that are correct from my data set? So again, these questions with results, you see they get very testy, very on the line of do we think it's ethical or unethical? Are we having some kind of intuitive reaction? Oh, this feels unethical. And then when we think about it logically, can't argue it. Or the opposite, that logically it seems unethical, but we have a feeling of, oh, it just feels right to do it. It feels easier, like I can do my work better and more efficiently. What are we thinking about that? Cool. Onto the discussion. So this is kind of similar to the lit review for me, although I find this a lot easier. But when we talk about implications, because again, when you're specializing on a certain kind of work like viewpoint diversity or something like that, you find that you're repeating yourself on what the implications are of the research. Like, what can we do with the research? We can increase viewpoint diversity. What happens if we don't have this research? We don't have viewpoint diversity. So again, the idea of it's starting to feel repetitive. Are there different ways I can word this? Are there things that I haven't thought of? I've talked about these implications here and these implications here, but are there other ones that I haven't thought of at all? So this example, what are the implications of signaling political identity on society? Just asking it, is there something I'm missing? Is it copying from ChatGPT? At what point do you need to cite ChatGPT if you paraphrase what it has, but you're still going from it in square one? If you're copying and pasting directly, do you need to cite it? Is it unethical to not cite it and only ethical if you cite it? Is it unethical all the way? Where are those lines? Where are those gray areas? Go ahead and chat. All right, we are coming to an end here. Obviously, there's a lot more that we could talk about when it comes to using AI. Using large language models when we do psychology research. But something that has really been on my mind, and I am struggling to find a counter argument to it. So discuss this and feel free to leave a comment if you like, and help me understand this in a different way. But I'll read it for you. Socrates was against writing as a new technology because he believed human memory would suffer as a result. Would we be doing society a disservice by not taking advantage of the technology we have? So Socrates argued that we shouldn't learn to write things down because then we won't remember anything. Is that true or not? Do you think we have worse memory now than we did before because we can write it down? Is this the same that we're seeing with artificial intelligence? You know, we aren't going to be able to retain enough information. We aren't going to actually learn how to do psychology research. We're just going to be using an assistant the whole time. So what's the point of being educated in it? Where do we find those lines between how much we should use it and how much we shouldn't? You think about like foreign language classes, Spanish and things like that. You do have to learn how to actually speak and talk instead of just writing things down. So do we need to also encourage writing down how you actually do your research instead of going to ChatGPT? Should you always be allowed to use it? Again, so much stuff to talk about. But thank you for joining me again. Feel free to leave comments of anything you're thinking about. As always, feel free to reach out, JillianLeeMeyer@gmail.com, and check us out on TikTok and Instagram @JillianLeeMorality.